Welcome to assignment 4. This is going to be the assignment that we finally try animating with a rig, specifically a rigged character. Here's a sneak peek of the rig right here. It's a juice box. See if we can control it and move it around and rotate it. So it has a couple of controls here in the top, the middle, and it has the root control as well as some controls in the straw. So some of the principles we are going to be tackling with this assignment, other than the basics that we've already gone over, are staging, which is presenting a character with a clear personality and intentional interactions with the world. Exaggeration, which is pushing a character just beyond the realms of realism to make it pop and add fun to the actions. And appeal, which is giving your character and animation a presence that really grabs your audience's attention. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. I'm giving you the character and the rig before you start the assignment. So once you have your Juicebox rig downloaded, it'll come as this MA file. And MA stands for Maya ASCII, meaning it's a Maya specific file and you can't take it to Blender or any other 3D software. It's an alternative to the more compact but less editable Maya binary format, the MB files that we have been working with. So let's put this file in our assets folder inside of our project folder. So I'm just going to grab it from my downloads. I have my project folder already set up, named the proper way, and I'm just going to place it inside of my assets folder. All right. So now let's bring this file into Maya as a rig. Now, I'm going to make a new scene here. You might be inclined to just go up to File and open the scene, especially if your project has been set. And you just kind of want to open the rig like normal, but that's not how we work with rigs when we're working in Maya. What we want to do is reference it. So if we come up to File and come down to this reference editor here, we'll get a window that looks like this, and this will list all of our references that we are using in our scene. But because this is a new scene, we don't have any references. So let's just hit this little plus button right here with this little diamond, and that will bring up our folder. Now, we are automatically put inside of our project folder. We just need to come to the assets file and select the rig here and click reference. All right, now you can see it's here as a reference. And there is our rigged juice box. Now, why do we reference a rig? Why don't we just open it? Well, because when we reference it, we can't destroy it. When it's referenced, all the important parts stay in the original file, and we cannot mess up the rig in any large or meaningful way. And this is the way that everybody should work when they're animating a rig. You don't just bring your rig straight into the scene because the more editing you do, the more you have the chance of messing it up. We want to reference it so that we don't destroy the rig. All right, let's take a look at this rig. We have a couple of control curves here that we can move and rotate, and it controls the rig inside of our juice box. Now, this one down at the bottom is called the root control. It's the main control, and we usually call it the root control, main control. There are a couple animators that call it the God node, whatever you want to call it. It's just the main one. Anything else, the geometry and the skeleton of the rig itself, we don't want to touch that. So I actually want to turn off our ability to select them. So let's go up to the top of Maya here. If you don't see it, it's going to be underneath this little shelf right here, this little icon. We're going to click this, and this opens up all of our selection sets. Now, the selection sets control what we can interact with in our scene. Right now, they're all toggled on, meaning if I hover over them, so we can see which ones they are. These are the joints, these are the curves, surface. If these are all toggled on, we can interact with the handles, joints, curves, surfaces, etc. in our scene. What we want to do is make sure that we're only touching the things animators are supposed to touch, which are the controls. So we can click each one of these to turn them off, or we can come to this little drop down button right here and select all objects off. So now if we try to select anything in our scene, we can't. Now, we do want to turn back on our ability to select the controls because we want to be able to animate that. So let's come to the one that says select curve objects here, and let's turn that back on. So now we once again have the ability to select the controls, but not the geometry or the rig. So now we're ready to animate. So we always want to work clean, meaning we want to key all of the attributes of our object on the first frame so that we have an initial position saved. So let's select all of our controls, and on frame 1, let's hit S on the keyboard and key our starting position. So now each of our controls have a keyed starting position, and we can animate it from here. Now, let's brainstorm how we want to animate our juice box here. Well, I have downloaded a couple of references, and these are animations of a sack of flour moving like a character, but with the weight and mannerisms you could envision a sack of flour having. Now, animating a sack of flour is actually an extremely common exercise that both 2D and 3D animators do when learning character fundamentals. They're just animating them moving or jumping and toddling around, and it teaches weight, timing, exaggeration, appeal without having to use a complex character. So we're going to use our juice box as a stand-in for a sack of flour. Now, here are a couple of GIFs that I have to use as a reference. They're all just kind of moving around in some simple cartoony ways. So we are going to animate our juice box kind of walking around in a juice boxy way, very cartoony and silly. Now let's explore our rig a bit. This is one of the first things you do when you are learning a rig. You just want to rotate it, push it around, and explore it a bit so that you can become familiar with the way that it moves and the way the controls are controlling it. Now, why is that important? Well, because it is going to have some limitations. Oh, and you can see one of them right there. So you can see when I took the straw controller and I was rotating on the x-axis, it was moving fine. If I do it on the z-axis, it's fine as well. But the second I do it on the y-axis, it completely breaks. So now we know that this straw is not meant to move on the y-axis. It's meant to only move on the z and the x-axis. So that's why we explore it, so that we can become familiar with not only the movement in the way that it can move, and the limitations of the rig itself. All right, something I want you to take note of. The rigger added some extra attributes that we can control. So if I actually select one of these controls, you can see in the channel box, we have these added attributes down here. We have a straw length. So if we change the value of that, we can actually make the straw longer or shorter. If I select this middle control here, I have the ability to change the value on an in and out attribute, which allows it to puff out and squeeze in. Same with a squash and stretch attribute right here. Let's check the root control here. We have some more. We have a front and back attribute, which allows our juice box to kind of toddle back and forth in a very cartoony way. And we have an attribute for the left and the right too. So now it can kind of kind of walk back and forth, left and right. So these attributes are just little bonus ones that the rigger added as some extra special ways of animating this specific rig. So now knowing that we can control this rig in only specific limited ways and that we have some added attributes that we can work with, we can set up our first pose. So I'm thinking I want to animate my juice box kind of toddling along, walking in a very cartoony way, very similarly to the sacks of flour animations that we saved as references, where they were just kind of going doon, 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 walking along. Um, Now, before I set my first keyframe for that animation, I do want to change my space from world space to local or object space. So I'm going to come over to my toolbox. I'm going to double click my tool here, and I'm going to change the axis orientation from world to object. Meaning now when I rotate any of my controls, my pivot rotates with it, which just makes it a little bit easier to visualize. So now I have all of my main controls or my main position, the values of that main position keyed on frame 1. Let's do our first pose. So I am going to select the root control down below, and we are going to change the value for the left-right custom controller that the rigger set up. So I can either click it and drag my mouse in here, or I can click the actual words right here, the left, right, and I can hold down my middle mouse in the viewport and slide my mouse back and forth here. So now I can change that value from within the viewport. That's just a nice hotkey to work with. That also works with any of the values here in the channel box. So any of the translate, if I select it and then middle mouse button in my viewport, I can change it. So for our first pose, I am going to select the left or right custom attribute, and I'm just going to kind of lean it over this way. All right, now following the laws of balance, if your bottom half is leaning in one direction, in order to maintain your balance, the top half needs to lean in the opposite direction. So I'm going to select this middle controller, and I'm just going to lean it in the opposite direction. Now I can do it for the tippy top one here as well and lean it like that. All right, and now thinking about the straw, let's consider that the straw is the head of our character here. So we want the head to kind of look in this direction in a natural way. So I'm going to select the bottom controller down below, and I'm just going to rotate it so it's kind of looking in this direction. Now I'm going to select all of the controls, every single one of them, and I'm going to hit S to key them. So now we have our first pose. For our second pose, I want to move half a second down the timeline. So we have it set to 24 frames per second because that's the default in Maya and that's the default for film. That means there are 24 frames for every second of our animation. So half a second would be half of 24, which is frame 12. Now with frame 12, we want to now have our juice box here step onto the opposite quote unquote foot. So I'm going to come to the left, right. We're going to change the value here. But before I do that, I am going to select all my controls and hit S just so that I have attributes keyed on frame 12. So I'm going to select the root control. And we can change the left-right custom attribute to be on the opposite side, and we can eyeball it, or we can just come to the channel box and we can keep the value that we have already in there and just put a negative in front so that it goes to the direct opposite side. And now let's rotate these top ones so that this juice box is keeping its balance. And let's rotate this face pointing the other direction. Okay, So now I'm going to select all of my controls again, and I'm going to hit S to key the new position. And now if we scrub through the timeline, we have this little stepping animation that we have with the juice box. All right, so we have our initial little animation here where it's gonna step from one foot to the other. But if we wanted this to loop, let's say we wanted it to step off of this foot and back onto this one, we do need to set up another keyframe. So if we want to go down the timeline another half a second, let's just count from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's going to put us around frame 25. So I'm going to just hit S on my keyboard with all of my controls selected. That's really important. If you don't have all of your controls selected when you hit S on the keyboard, you are not keying every single control. Now, it is the same pose that we had in frame 12. So we want to bring it back to this position. So I'm actually going to select frame 1. I'm going to hold Shift and select it. Then I'm going to right-click, copy. I'm going to come to frame 25. I'm going to right-click, paste, paste. So now we're back to our initial position. And if I push play on that, he's stepping along. Now, we do have all this dead space. We do have 250 frames, which we don't need that many. Let's bring it back down to 25 frames. So that is our full animation right there. So I'm going to come here, and I'm just going to delete the 0 on this. So now we have our entire animation is just 25 frames, where it's just looping this little character going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All right, so we have our first draft of our animation here. It's really simple though, so now it is time for a breakdown, which if you haven't had that already this semester, now's your first one. That's just a joke. A breakdown is when you go in and you refine your animation by adding more in-between poses and just really refining how your characters or your objects are moving. There are multiple breakdowns that happen when animating. You'll usually have 2 or 3, and each one is just building on your pre-existing frames and just working and refining that animation. So now it's time for our first breakdown. Let's go halfway between frame 1 and frame 12. So I think I'm just going to go to frame 6. And with all of the controls selected, I'm just going to hit S to key this position that we have, and we do want to change it and just add some more character to the movement here. So let's think of the fundamentals of movement right now. Let's think about the human body and every living body and the way that they move. If you move your hands, it affects how your wrists and your elbows move as well. Your arm is going to move with it. Even the most minute movements, there is going to be a reaction, a chain of reaction that goes throughout the entire body. That's because the human works as a living chain. If you're moving one section of your body, chances are the rest of the body is following along, no matter how small those movements may be. So that's why we have that principle of arcs, because if I swing my arm up over my head, the rest of my arm, my shoulder, everything follows along in an arc. It is the most natural shape that's created as we move. So even though our juice box is extremely simple, it is moving in arcs. You do get arcs here, and you can kind of see it as we scrub through the frames here. It's moving in an arc. So in order to accentuate that arc, we want to add a little bit of squash and stretch to our middle frame here. So with everything selected, let's see here. Yeah, let's keep it on frame 6. With everything selected, no, just with the middle controller selected, we have our squash and stretch attribute here. So in order to accentuate the movement of our juice box, we want to squash it down a little bit as it's in between its steps here. So I'm going to select the squash and stretch, and I'm going to middle mouse button, squash it a bit. And then I'm going to hit S on my keyboard. Another way that we can accentuate the movement of our juice box is by rotating it as it's moving. So we do have it squashing down as it's stepping between, but also on frame 6, we can rotate it. So I'm going to rotate this middle control a bit. I'm going to hit S just to key that. And let's do the top one a bit. Hit S as well. And we can also do the same thing with the straw. So with this top one selected, I can also rotate that down and hit S to key that. So now when we're going between steps, this juice box is really crunching down. It's really feeling that movement there. And so that's always nice to just give it a little bit more believability. So look at this first initial step here versus the other one here, where it's just kind of shifting back and forth. By adding a little bit of a breakdown and adding some in-between changes here in this middle frame, we have a more realistic movement from this one to this one. So now we have this nice breakdown right here between these two frames. Let me select everything. We want to have another one between these two frames. So we need to do what we did on frame 6, but in the opposite direction between frame 12 and frame 25. So I'm just going to go to frame 18. I'm just going to hit S to just key some initial positions. And now we're going to do the same thing that we did for the other breakdown. I'm just going to select the middle control here. And let's just squash it down. Hit S to key that. And then let's rotate things as well. So let's grab this middle controller. Let's rotate that forward. Hit S. This top one as well. Hit S. And this straw as well. And we'll hit S. So now we have a breakdown, a little bit of some in-between frames in between the key frames, these big key poses. So we have some more life added to our juice box. All right, so we have our animation here, but it does need a little bit more of a breakdown or even a second breakdown. One of the things that you're going to take note of is Maya is interpolating between our main key poses and our little in-between keyframes that we made here. From here to here, it's squashing down starting from frame 1 because it comes to its peak squash here and then stretches back up. Well, we don't want that. We don't want it to be squashing as it still has its foot lifted and it's bringing it down. We only want it to really squash around when the foot makes contact with the ground. So let's break down this further. I'm going to come to frame 4 here. And I am just going to hit S to key all of the attributes here or the entire position here. And we want to get rid of the squash and stretch effect. So I'm just going to put in 0 and I'm going to hit S. So now we don't have the squash and stretch from frame 1 to 4, but once we hit frame 4, we start having it squash down to frame 6 and it stretches back up. So we are just refining the interpolation a little bit more so when we push play, it looks much better. So what else can we do to break down this animation further? I'm going to select all of my controls. And some more things we can change. On frame 4, we can even make it a little less rotated than it was, so that it doesn't really start rotating until we hit frame 4 and come to frame 6. We can do the same thing with the straw. We can have it not so low. Let me hit S to key that. so that we have this nice little drag now between the straw here. And even if we want to exaggerate it a little bit more, we can. We can have it swing. Let's see here. We can have it start out a little bit more to the side on frame 1. Hit S. So that when it comes to this position, there's a little bit more of a drag, and then it squashes down and swings this way. And on frame 12, we can turn this a little more and hit S to key that. So now we have a little bit more of an exaggerated motion to the straw here. Now, we can include another breakdown between frame 6 and frame 12, doing what we did here on frame 4. So let's come to frame 8 and let's make those same changes. Let's select everything, hit S to key it so that everything's getting keyed on frame 8. And let's remove that squash and stretch. So let's come here and let's hit 0 on the keyboard and S to key it. Now we can do the opposite of what we had going on here, where it dragged down into this squash. We can have it drag out of the squash, or out of the squash. So we can actually select this middle one and rotate a little bit further. Hit S. We can do the same here, hit S, and we can do the same with the straw a bit, where we can rotate it down a bit and hit S. So now there's a little bit of a drag of it coming back and popping back into its initial position. So now we have a little bit more of a lifelike movement. So if I push play, that looks really nice. I'm going to increment and save as I have been doing. And let's break it down further on this side of the animation now. All right, let's do the same thing on the opposite side, on this side of the animation. So let's come to frame 15, and I'm going to select all my controls and I'm going to hit S. Now we want to create a drag between frame 15 and frame 18. So doing the opposite of what we did on this side, let's grab this middle one and let's rotate it out. I'm going to hit S to key that here as well, and with the straw as well. I'm going to hit S. And I'm also going to select the middle one, and I'm going to get rid of the squash. So I'm going to come over here to the channel box, and I'm going to set that value to 0, and I'm going to hit S to key that. So now it doesn't start squashing until it gets closer to right around here. So now we have it go boom down, and we want to come to one of these in between frames here and break it down further on that side. All right, let's go to frame 22 here. And let's have all the controls selected, hit S to key them. And because we're coming from a down position and we want it to drag as it comes pops back up, we do want to rotate everything down a bit. So let's just rotate it and key it, the straw as well, so that when it pops back up, it really pops back up. So now let's take a look at our animation here. All right. So this is a really good start. This is a really good rough draft that we're working with here. But let's refine it further to get a very natural movement to it. Before I start refining the animation with the graph editor, I do want to make some changes to my keyframes, specifically with the spacing. You'll notice from frame 1 to frame 15, we have some nice spacing between each keyframe. But the spacing between keyframes on this side of the animation does not match up with this side. So from frame 1 to 15, that's fine, but let's change our keyframes on this side. So I'm just going to move this keyframe down 1. So I'm going to hold Shift, click it, and middle mouse button so that this is now on frame 17. And then this one, I'm going to move down to frame 20. And then this keyframe on frame 25, I'm going to move down to frame 23. So now the spacing between these keyframes will be identical to the spacing between these keyframes. So now if I play the animation, all right, looks better. I'm also going to bring down my overall length of my animation from 25 frames to 23 frames. So now when I push play, it's a nice loop. All right, let's change our workspace from general to animation. And I'm going to make sure that all my controls are selected, and I'm just going to hit F in the graph editor so that we're looking at all of the changes that we've made. Okay, so here is the interpolation of our animation for each control. And we just want to clean it up here. So let's do this piece by piece. So I'm going to start off with this middle controller here. And I'm going to hit F to frame all of that. Okay, I can already see that there needs to be some editing. So we didn't really keyframe any changes with the translates, but the rotates we did. So let's start off with rotate X. And you can already see that there's an issue. So from this side, we have a nice curve of motion that it just comes up in a nice arc. On this side, it flatlines between frame 17 and frame 20. We don't want that. We want this to be a nice arc as well, mimicking what's happening on this side. So I'm going to, let's move this one first. So this one is in the same position as this one. I'm just going to hold shift and I'm going to middle mouse button slide this one up to right around there. So now we have this kind of ramp going on here that matches the ramp over here. Now let's bring this one down to maybe somewhere around there. And then you can see that this one's not at the same value as this one. So let's bring this one up a bit. And then this one, we just want to make sure that we don't have any weird easing. So one thing, a hint that will help you out a ton. When you're moving your tangent handles around, one of the things you don't want to see is you don't want to see one tangent handle on one side of the curve. Let's say it's on this side of the curve. Let me just show you. You don't want one tangent handle on this side of the curve and then the other tangent handle on the opposite side of the curve. That causes issues. That's where you see these bumps where you want a smooth line. You want to keep your tangent handles on the same side of the curve. So I'm going to lift this up so that they're both on this side of the curve. And you can see now we have that nice smooth ramp there. So now if we push play, okay, smooth things out. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing as we're working through each value here in the graph editor. We're trying to not only smooth out our curves so that we don't have any weird easing, but we also want to try to get all of our keyframes on this side of the animation to be as closely resemble what's going on this side of the animation. Okay, so that was rotate X. That looks good now. Let's check rotate Y. All right, we didn't make any changes in rotate Y. Rotate Z. I'm going to hit F to frame this. Okay, you can see there's a little bit of bumpiness on this side. So we do want to just smooth things out a bit. And here's another tip. So you can see we have this nice defined ramp coming down. It hits its peak at this absolute middle keyframe, and then it comes back up. So It's pretty identical on either side. It is a well-defined curve here. So if we wanted to, we could actually delete these in-between frames, and you see it's not going to change much of the actual shape of the curve, so they're a little unnecessary. If we leave this one here, that's fine, but these in-between ones, they can go, and it's not going to change the actual shape of the curve enough to really change the animation. So now if we push play, we still have our animation. We still have this same defined curve following this path, but we don't have those pesky little in-between keyframes that were unnecessary for the animation. Okay, so we cleaned that one up. That was rotate Z. Let's check the in-out. Okay, we didn't make any changes using the in-out custom controller. If you wanted to, you could add some keyframes with that in-out controller. Let's say if we wanted it to, when it comes down, changing the feet, if you wanted to have it puff out, maybe you could keyframe that. And then as it pops up, maybe you can make it squeeze in. So that would just be a fun way to add some more exaggeration and appeal to our character. But I'll let you mess around with that. So this one looks fine because I didn't add any keyframes with changes in the values there. Let's check the squash and stretch. I'm going to hit F to frame it. Okay, you can already see we have three keyframes here. We have one on with a value of 0. Then we have one at the tippy top that hits a value of 10. And then we have this one on the other side that hits a value of 0. So this side is not mimicking that. This one has a value of 0. This one has, let me select this, a value of 10. And this one has a value of 3.936. We don't want that. So I could either come in here and slide it down by hand, or I could just come in here and type 0. Okay, so that's going to have cleaned up our curve just a bit. Okay, much better. So now everything that happens on this side is mimicking what happens on this side. If we wanted to, we could also get rid of some of the easing here. You can see where it flattens a bit, there's some easing. We didn't want easing. If we wanted it to be a little more of a sharp change, we could select this keyframe, right-click, break tangents, and we could make this more of a linear curve. So now it really would pop down into that squash versus easing into it like with this one. So let's see what that looks like. A very, very small change. Whereas this one eases into that squash. This one now pops down into a squash and pops back up. So if you want to change that, you can. I'm just going to undo and bring it back to what it was. Okay, so that was everything for the middle controller. We cleaned that up. Overall, that looks pretty clean to me. Let's do the root controller now. All right, let's hit F to frame everything, and let's do this. Let's do this attribute by attribute. So did we key anything on the translate? No, we didn't really make any changes on the translate. Let's check the rotation. So rotate X, yes. Okay, you can see I accidentally made a keyframe on the root control where I rotated it a tiny bit here. And you can see that if I just zoom in a bit, that root control wobbles. It kind of rotates just a teeny bit on frame 4, and it doesn't move for the rest of the keyframes. So I'm just going to select this and delete it. Okay, so that got rid of that weird wobbling. Now let's check rotate Y. Nothing there. Nothing there on rotate Z. Let's check scale X. That's fine. Scale Y, that's fine. Scale Z, that's fine. Let's check our front back. Fine. Our left and right. This is where we have that toddling motion. So let's clean this one up as well. Um, Once again, we have some unnecessary keyframes. If we delete them, it's not going to change the curve too much. So I'm just going to delete these pesky little in-between ones. And you can see it didn't really change the overall curve much. Now let's check this out. But you know what? It got rid of some of the organic asymmetric movement. So now it's too symmetric. It's almost mechanical. So if I push play, you can see it's stepping in a very mechanical robotic motion. So I'm actually going to bring those keyframes back because that gives it more of an organic personality. So if I push play, yeah, I'm going to keep those keyframes where we have little minute changes because now we have a character with personality and less of a mechanical movement. Check the scale all. That's fine. Okay, so that was the root control. Let's check this top control here. I'm going to hit F to frame everything. Translates, nothing. Rotate. So we have some issues here. We have some weird easing and then no easing. So I'm just going to bring this down a bit so that we have a little bit more of exaggerated rotations. So it comes and it pops up, and then it eases back down. And if we wanted it to pop up again, we could get this one. No, we could leave that one there. Let's lift this one up a bit so that we don't have as much of a flat area between these two keyframes. Okay. I can work with that. Okay, let's check rotate Y, nothing. Rotate Z. Let's see. So once again, we could delete these in between frames, but that does run the risk, like with the last one, um, making our movements too mechanical and less asymmetric, which really is going to give this juice box some personality. If I wanted to, I could exaggerate things a little bit. Let's see. Just select the one. If I really wanted to exaggerate it, make it really lean to the side, come down, and make it really lean to the other side, I could get some exaggerated movements. I'm just going to try to frame everything here. So when it pops up and then it scrunches down, then it pops up in the other direction. This one here. Really get it to exaggerate the motion. So let's push play on that. So it really is now it's like thrusting its little shoulders a little bit more from side to side. So if we really wanted to exaggerate it, we could exaggerate the shape of the curve here. I was okay with where it was at though, so I'm just going to leave it here. Straw length, we didn't change any of the values in the straw length, and we didn't switch between IK and FK for the rig, so no changes there. Let's check the straw controllers. I'm going to hit F to frame that. Rotate. That's a nice clean curve. Rotate Y. This one we can lift up a bit. So now, okay, that looks fine. Rotate Z. Okay, some weird things going on here. I'm going to just lift this one up a bit so that we have it doing the same thing on either side. Let's push play. Okay, that cleaned it up. And then let's check this controller up here. Rotate X, rotate Y, rotate Z. Okay. So sometimes when they look fine, when it looks completely flat like this, you still need to hit F on your keyboard to frame it. Usually, the changes in the values are so small that when you're looking at it, it looks completely flat. But once you hit F to frame it, you're going to see there's actually a curve to it with just very small changes. So always hit F when you select a new value or a new attribute, either a rotation or a translate or scale. Remember to hit F so that you frame it and you can see the curve. So this one, let's see here. What can we change here? So it starts rotated far to the side. It comes forward, down, pops. Let's see what I can do here. And bring this one down. Just trying to mimic what's going on the other side. All right, that works. Rotate Y, F, rotate Z, F. Okay, so we clean things up a bit. Let's look at our overall animation again. I'm going to push play. Let's go stomp, 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 stomp. Okay. So we clean things up. It looks good. Once again, there's more that we could do. I could come in here and I could exaggerate everything a little bit more. I could make it really throw its head back when it pops up. I could really make it swing from side to side a little bit, scrunching down more, crunching down more before it comes and pops back up. So there's a lot that I could do to change it. I could add, which one was it? I could add, like I was talking about, that squeezing when it pops up and when it comes down, have it puff out, which I encourage you to try. Please try to do that. It could really help with the personality of this character and the appeal of it if you try to use the in-out custom controller in between the steps. Okay, I'm going to leave it as is, and let's call this refined, finished, we're done. But let's add a shader to it and render out our animation sequence. Okay, let's get this up for rendering. So I'm going to change my workspace back to general. And I am going to save scene as, and I'm just going to name it animation finished. I had made a previous version, so I'm just going to replace it. So now, in order to texture this, we need to make it so that we can select the geometry again. Now, I'm not going to have you, although it is UV mapped, if I actually come here, I'd first need to make the geometry selectable, but I could show you that it is UV mapped. So if you wanted to, you could technically take it to Substance and texture it. But it's just a simple juice box. So I am just going to use one of the simple shaders within Maya, just a color, an AI standard surface one where I just changed the color on it. So let's make sure that we can select our geometry. So we want to have all of our objects selectable again. So up here, all objects are turned on. And over in the layers, we have our controls and our geometry. This no touchy one is actually the rig. So that one really no touchy. You don't want to ruin your rig here. So the controls are fine. The geometry, we want to make it selectable. So you're going to click where it says R. So it's no longer a reference. And now you can select the geometry. Now with that selected, I'm just going to right click and hold, assign new material, Arnold, standard surface. Let's go to the attribute editor and let's change the color of it here to something like something like that. I can also bring up the roughness on it, specular roughness, so that it has no reflection or no specularity. Okay, let's just name it juice box. S for shader, capital S. Okay, so now we have a shader assigned. We can light our scene. We can set up a camera, and we can render out our animation sequence. So let's set up a backdrop. Let's bring down a polygon plane, scale that up, edge mode, and let's get all of these edges selected. Edit mesh, extrude. Let's flip those up. And then let's click away. And then I'm inside of the extrude tools still, so I'm going to select my move tool. And I'm going to select these two edges inside of the corners. And I'm going to go to edit mesh, bevel. Let's go to maybe 0.7, and let's bring up the segments to maybe 5. All right, click away. Now let's select all of the edges along the seam here. So I'm going to hold shift, double click. I'm going to zoom in to get each of these little ones here. Not that one. I'm going to click that one, hold shift, double click on this one over here to get all the ones in between. And then holding shift, click all these little ones. And then same deal. I'm going to hold shift, click this one, come to the last one, hold shift, double click it to get all the ones in between. Okay, so now we can come up to edit mesh, bevel, bring up that fraction a bit, and add some segments, maybe 5. Object mode. Okay, so now we have a backdrop with some smooth edges. And we can change the color on this backdrop as well. So I'm going to right click, hold, assign new material, Arnold, standard surface. Go to the attribute editor, change the color here to, let's do something a little more cheery. Nice yellow maybe. And then bring up the roughness on that so it's not terribly reflective. Okay. If we want to, we can even turn on ambient occlusion so that we have a nice shadow. And I'm going to increment and save, and then I'm going to set up my camera and my lighting system. Okay, so I made a simple 3-point lighting system using the Arnold area lights. Move this over a bit. I have my rim light in the back that you can see is pointed at the back of my juice box. I have my fill light and my key light. Now with the intensity of these, you always want your rim light to be the brightest one. You want your key light or your fill light to be half the percent that the rim light is, and then you want your key light to be half of what your fill light is. So for the exposure, I have it set to 5 for the rim, 2.5 for the fill, 1.25 for the key. I also went ahead and set up my camera right here, and now mimicking our setup with the, give myself some more room, with the setup that we had for the axe throw. I have my 2 view where I'm looking through the camera and I'm looking through the perspective, and I made sure that in this one I locked the camera. So I have my backdrop, I have my lighting system, and I have my camera set up. I did not animate my camera, but that is an option if you want to animate it. Maybe come swinging around the juice box, whatever you want to do. That's up to you. You also don't need to mimic this setup. I say it all the time, but I do encourage you to try things out. Explore the way you want to stage stuff. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing in the tutorials, because I keep it really simple on purpose. I keep it simple so that you don't get overwhelmed. But I do encourage you to try things out. So now let's set up our render settings. I'm going to come up to Arnold. And I just want to remind you, because I don't think I've really gone over it in the tutorials, but you have two ways of opening up your render settings. You can either click this little icon here, which is the render settings, or you can change your menu set from modeling to rendering. And now you have your render tab, and your render settings is right here. And they both just open up this same window. So important, I want to make sure we're using the Arnold renderer. We don't want to be using Maya software. Make sure that you have it set to Arnold renderer. Because this is an animation sequence, we need a prefix. So I'm going to make it juice box. I am going to make it a PNG because I don't need it to be an EXR, which is very high def. I'm going to change the format to 16. And remember, we don't want to render out a single frame. We're doing an animation sequence. So I'm going to change this to name number dot extension. And we have 23 frames of animation. So I'm going to set our end frame to 23. You want to make sure you're rendering from your camera. Preset, I'm going to change it to 1080. I'm going to close that. Now, going to view camera settings, I'm going to turn on my resolution gate so we can see exactly what's going to be rendered out. I'm going to unlock my camera. I'm just going to make sure that I have as much of the juice box in view as I want. Okay, I'm going to lock that again. So now we can open up the render view just to see how our lighting looks. I'm going to make sure that it's in camera shape and not perspective. Okay, so lights, there's an issue here. Check what that is. Forgot to turn off normalize for each one of my lights. So I'm going to select each light and I'm going to turn off normalize inside of the attribute editor. Now if I run this again, yes, everything should be brighter. But I want them to have more intensity, so I'm going to bring up the intensity on these. Ooh, that's very intense. Okay, I'm going to keep messing around with my lighting system just to get some really nice lighting, and we'll come back to check it out. So I just changed my rim lighting a little bit. I just lifted up higher so it wasn't directly behind my juice box, and I also brought down the spread a bit so it's a little more, a little less boom in your face all over the juice box. So I'm okay with this. I'm going to stop, and now I have my lights, I have my backdrop, I have my camera, and I did make sure that my render settings are all set with my prefix, my image format, my name number dot extension, making sure it was starting on the correct frame and ending on the correct frame, making sure that my renderable camera is set to the camera, HD 1080, and making sure that I'm using the Arnold renderer. I can now come back up to render sequence, opening up the options box. Once again, making sure I'm rendering from the camera and choosing my output location to be the images file inside of my Juicebox project folder. So now I hit select, and when I click render sequence and close, it is going to render out that sequence and we can take a look at it. All right, the entire render sequence has been rendered. Let's take a look at the project folder. And here is my images file, and there is my full render sequence from frame 1 to frame 23. So There is my little animation fully rendered. Now, you're good to go. You can go ahead and zip up your project folder and submit it, or you can go ahead and take this render sequence to compositing software like After Effects or DaVinci Resolve and render out your little animation video from there. Otherwise, you are all set. Good work.